All right. Well, hello, everybody. We might as well get started. So my name is Jordan Beck, and I'm the coordinator with the UHN Office of Research Trainees. I'm pleased to welcome you here all today for a panel to learn about career journeys from UHN biomedical engineers. Before I pass it over to Jeffrey, who will be our moderator for today's panel, I have a few announcements and housekeeping notes that I'd like to share with everyone. So before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University Health Network operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and Allied Nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this territory. I do encourage everyone in the room today to check out some of the information that's on the screen. First, if you're interested in learning about the land which you're currently located on, you can text your city and province to the number on the slide. It's some really cool information to learn more about the Indigenous history of the land. As well, there's a QR code which has a number of different truth and reconciliation resources which you can go and explore. We'll give a quick moment to capture this information and then we will continue. Now, just a few housekeeping notes. We do ask that everyone does remain muted and keep your video off during the presentation portion. Today, we're expecting a number of people in the room, so we just want to ensure that there's enough bandwidth conserved for everyone to have a good viewing experience. There'll also be a Q&A portion at the end of the panel where you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Questions will be asked exclusively through Slido, and you can do so by going to slido.com and entering the code 512-0501. I'll also be putting the link to the Slido into the chat periodically through the panel as well. Today's event has been organized and is being conducted in accordance with the ORT's Code of Conduct and Inclusivity Commitment. We do ask that this is followed and any non-compliance will result in removal from today's event. Lastly, your feedback is extremely important to us, so do please consider filling out our feedback survey at the end of today's panel, and this can be accessed by scanning the QR code, saving it for later, or the survey will also be automatically generated in an internet browser when you exit the Zoom meeting. So please do consider filling that out. I'll also be popping a link to it in the chat as well. Zoom also has a number of different accessibility features available to those who are taking part in Zoom meetings and events, just like this one. One of the many features available to you are captions, which can be enabled by clicking the Show Captions button in the bar at the bottom of the Zoom window. Caption settings can be edited and adjusted to your personal preferences or needs by clicking the up arrow on the Show Captions button. You can then adjust things like font size, color, contrast, and many other things. Additional accessibility features that Zoom offers can be found by clicking the link that I'm just shared into the chat, or you can also scan the QR code on the screen with your phone. So again, I'll give one quick moment to capture this. And now I'd like to pass it over to Jeffrey, who will introduce our great panel.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and welcome everyone. My name is Jeffrey Webster, and I'll be moderating today's panel. I'm the Compliance and Planning Associate with the Clinical Research Support Systems team, as well as a member of the research professionals at UHN. For those of us who may not be familiar with our group, the research professionals at UHN is a staff-led group working across the research institutes to provide a platform for research professionals to network, socialize, collaborate, and learn. This week, May 19 to 25, is National Biomedical and Clinical Engineering Week. As such, we are delighted to spotlight some of the dedicated professionals behind UHN's medical devices, that is to say, the Medical Engineering Department. In the Med-Eng department, technologists, engineers, and other specialists seamlessly blend their passion for healthcare and technology to enhance patient care, research, and education. Guided by the principles of support, build, and explore, this team now strengthened by the merger with colleagues from West Park, ensures critical medical equipment functions, leads technology planning, drives innovation, and propels research through clinical and academic partnerships. Often behind the scenes, yet always essential, they are a keystone in ensuring the safety, performance, and advancement of the medical technologies Team UHN relies on every day and are critical to UHN's vision of a healthier world. Joining us today from MedEng, we have the Director of Biomedical Engineering, Dr. Ian Connell. Dr. Ian Connell is a nuclear engineer and a medical physicist specializing in magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI technology, and its applications in point-of-care imaging and image-guided therapeutics. As a director in the Biomedical Engineering Department at UHN, he oversees clinical engineering and biomedical operations across UHN hospitals, managing a diverse portfolio of medical technologies and equipment. Dr. Connell's research focuses on MRI and related imaging systems development, namely image-guided interventions in neurosurgery and neuromodulation. Prior to his dual academic and operations role, Ian contributed to the development of Canada's first FDA-approved, dedicated, point-of-care, head-only MRI scanner. Say that 3 times quickly. Welcome, Ian. From the Clinical Engineering Department, we have Leanne Ladouceur. Leanne has been a clinical engineer at UHN since January 2023. She supports the perioperative portfolio at the Toronto General Hospital, leads projects on patient handling equipment, and evaluates medical devices for research at UHN. Leanne's journey began with a BSc in neuroscience from Carleton University, where she gained experience at a family physician's office, and then she moved to an optometrist's office before pursuing engineering. She earned a Bachelor's of Engineering in Electrical and Biomedical Engineering and a Master's of Applied Science in Biomedical Engineering from McMaster. And during her studies, she interned at Mackenzie Health Hospital and also contributed to developing a novel biomedical engineering program at McMaster. Leanne has also worked as a research associate in a biomedical engineering lab at the McMaster University. And finally, we have biomedical engineering technologist Adil Abdosh. Adil has an advanced diploma from Durham College and honed his skills initially as a student while working at the Toronto Western Hospital and has dedicated 17 years supporting healthcare technology at the Toronto General Hospital. Adil is passionate about innovative solutions that bridge technology and patient care. Welcome again, everyone. So, panelists, today our audience consists of research operational staff, clinical research coordinators, and learners from across the organization. Given the mixed experiences of our audience, let's start the discussion with a brief overview of what medical engineering is. And Ian, as a director for this group, would you be so kind as to talk to us a little bit about what medical engineering is and what different medical engineering teams at UHN are and your role as director?
Thanks, Jeffrey. Medical engineering is, well, you sort of said it better than maybe I even could at the introduction, so you stole my thunder. But it is doing all the work in the back end to make sure medical devices, so these are things that we put on patients, these are things we use for diagnostics and interventions, making sure those things are safe and effective, making sure they're deployed and we're managing them from when we bring them into the hospital to then when they exit the hospital, meaning buying things and then also disposing of them. So a large part of what we'd call clinical engineering is sort of that health technology management piece. So at UHN, there's we just did the numbers last year, but $400 million worth of equipment we're responsible for across all the UHN sites. So these are medical devices. These are imaging systems that we support as well. And making sure that we have the right technology is a big job and it's a big lift. And also buying it, deploying it, going to market, understanding, and working with the clinician partners to make sure that we have the best of breed and we have the best technology that fits for purpose, and also that, quite frankly, we can afford it, right? So we work in a public healthcare system, and so triaging needs and looking across the portfolios and understanding what's high priority today and then what's coming down the line in 5 years. So that's something that we call capital planning, which we take a very big part in, and then actually enacting those capital plans is actually a very big lift as well. So that's what a lot of folks like Leanne and other clinical engineers do sort of in the day-to-day outside of general project work and working with clinician partners. On sort of the more acute and in the OR settings and in other areas like imaging where folks are running in and sort of saving the day, that's like a deal. And that's also our imaging technologists and other folks that sometimes, patients can be on the table and technology fails, and then we need to know what we need to do to safely continue with that procedure, or in some instances, safely exit from that procedure and then find an alternative route for that patient and their care. And so that's folks like Adil. And so we have a bunch of divisions across our technologists. So they support different systems. Obviously, $400 million of equipment. Not everyone can be trained to do everything. And so we have specialization. So I'd mentioned imaging. So we have both 15 technologists that are responsible for everything except for MRI across all UHN sites. We have folks that are going into the OR, anesthesia gas machines, things of that nature, and life-saving equipment. And also we have surgical support. So when devices come back and they need to be prepared, endoscopes, things of that nature, we're also responsible for that. So we're really behind the scenes in many ways. We're not clinicians and we're not sort of in those departments, so we're not necessarily using the tools, but we're providing them, making sure they're safe. And then I'd say the last sort of core bit, and I'd look to Adil and Leanne to correct me, in medical engineering, is making sure things are safe, and they're safe from a research perspective. So we have a very active engagement in capture, so allowing research studies to proceed when we find gaps in either protocol or the kind of device that folks are trying to use. We sort of are there to not necessarily gatekeep, I don't like that word, but to help those researchers understand what is required from Health Canada perspective, not just our perspective, and work with them to enable their research studies. And then the other aspect too is not everything, unfortunately, at a hospital goes well. And when things don't go well, we have to understand if there was harm to a patient or if there was some sort of mitigations that can be performed. We go in and we perform investigations. There's various regulatory requirements that are our responsibility. So something called Vanessa's Law. So if unfortunately something does happen, if technology is implicated, we're there and we play a very crucial role investigating technology, making sure that that it wasn't the technology's fault, not trying to assign blame, but just trying to understand how do we prevent this from happening in future. And so we also coordinate across our colleagues at a national level. The Canadian Society of Biomedical Engineering is also sort of hospital peer-to-peer, and do that reporting, because sometimes there's also sort of near misses, and we want to make sure that if we register a near miss, other hospitals are aware of it, and sometimes we band together and we together, the hope is Canada sort of has a stronger medical engineering department in all these local hospitals. We can then have increased patient safety sort of writ large. I'll pause there because I feel like I said a lot. There are more things that we do, but I tried to pick out sort of some of the big ones.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. Thanks for the overview indeed. So Leanne, can you talk to us a little bit more about your operating room support group and clinical engineering? But first, just tell us what is a medical device and how
Yeah,
does the review department support research involving medical devices?
yeah. So medical device is it's kind of a broad term, but Health Canada defines it as any instrument or component that's going to be used to treat, diagnose, or prevent a disease or abnormal physical condition. And if you see me looking away, that's because I wanted to make sure we had that uh, definition absolutely correct, because that's a really important one that comes up with research. Because often within the research world, we don't necessarily, we might be using a medical device, but maybe it's not being used under that definition. And that's where our team comes into play and often reviews the studies within our capture system and just identifies whether it's being a device is actually being used as a medical device or perhaps it's not, but it still needs electrical safety certification. So that's something that comes up pretty often for us. There is also software as a medical device. So if a device is actually intended to be used as, serving the purpose of a medical purpose, and isn't necessarily just supporting the hardware, that's another category that comes into play within our capture system as well. So my role and one of my colleagues, Stacy, we take care of reviews anytime a researcher submits a study into capture. They need to identify whether there are any devices that are going to be used as a medical device or perhaps is a medical device but isn't necessarily being used as a medical device in their particular study. We make sure that it's all going to be used safely, just to ensure all of our patients and participants at UHN are always going to be safe in their participation in research. And then that's one component of my role, but then I also play kind of an operational role as well that Ian had talked about in terms of planning and supporting the surgical support group, which is our technologists who go into the OR if there's something, a piece of equipment that goes down in the middle of a case, or even just bringing in new equipment, helping with training, helping with bringing in the new types of equipment, identifying what's appropriate for the OR.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks so much. Okay, Adil, can you tell us more about your role with the Electromed Group and what a biomedical engineering technologist does at UHN?
Sure. So at the base level, my job is to maintain medical technology at the hospital. And so that includes demand maintenance. So when something breaks on site, as Ian alluded to, if the patient's on the table, we have to be there on site to take care of the issue. And also preventative maintenance. So these are scheduled maintenance intervals for devices. And we generally receive factory training or manufacturer's training so that we can maintain the devices exactly as the manufacturer suggests. That way, reducing any sort of liability that the hospital will assume. And also, on the side, we also work with the clinical engineers when they take over projects as project managers. And because we are at the front line as technologists, they rely on us as subject matter experts. So any sort of complaints that clinicians have, we receive them first. We're kind of like I don't want to say punching bags, but we receive the criticism of a particular technology that they're currently using and how we can improve it on the next iteration of the technology that we're getting during like a RFP process. And also, this is a fairly new thing. We now identify certain issues that or certain shortcomings that the hospital may have with certain devices. So, for example, one of our technologists, he's sort of the head or the de facto head of our like 3D printing section in our department, and he's very keen in the areas that he goes to. He notices certain shortcomings, certain problems, and we design things to implement them into the clinical areas. In this case, it was an oxygen regulator, and in the ICU they have two oxygen regulators, one for the patient for breathing, and the other regulator goes to a ECMO machine, which is blood oxygen transfer device.
Yeah.
Yes. So there were times where the perfusionist would confuse one regulator from another. So they cranked down their regulator, the one for the ECMO, thinking it was for the machine, but end up turning off the oxygen to the patient. So these sort of innovations we implement in clinical areas.
Thanks, Adele, and thank you for taking the brunt.
I got
Okay,
used to it.
no worries. Okay, so thanks guys for expounding on your current role. So let's take a step back now and examine the journey of how you got to this point within your respective careers. And for this, I think I'll start with Leanne. Tell us about going from neuroscience to the doctor's office to the optometrist's office and then into engineering.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess my journey is maybe a more unique one, especially coming from science first. I would say from a young age, I knew I wanted to be in the healthcare field and domain. I had at first thought, like many high school students, I'm sure do, think that they're going to go to medical school. So that was my plan in going to neuroscience. After I graduated from that degree, I did apply to medical school, didn't get in like many people don't. And actually, funnily enough, thought that as a science student, I said, okay, well, I'll do some engineering in the meantime, which all of my friends at that time who were in engineering got quite upset at me because engineering is certainly not something you do in the meantime, which I now have discovered. But I started my program at McMaster University and ended up falling in love and realized that this was another avenue to get into the healthcare field that I actually enjoyed more. It was more hands-on. I could be more creative. I actually really enjoyed it. And having my transfer credits from my first degree, the first year that I was at McMaster in engineering, it really put me in the deep end of what engineering really is. And I really haven't looked back, that I have loved engineering the entire time. So I did my undergrad at McMaster in electrical and biomedical engineering. Through that program, I was able to do an internship at Mackenzie Health Hospital and really get some face time within the hospital itself. And then actually decided to do a master's degree. I was convinced in my last year by one of my one of my professors at the time, who then became my supervisor for my master's degree. And I worked definitely more on the bench top. I was kind of more in a wet lab. But we worked on antimicrobial surfaces. But I knew long term I really wanted to be back in the hospital. So after I finished my master's degree, did stick around that lab. I was really enjoying what I was doing, and the lab was very multidisciplinary, so there was a lot more to continue learning. But quite quickly, kind of realized that there was nowhere else for me to go from there, being a research or a lab manager, basically, and a research associate in that lab. There wasn't really anywhere to go up unless I was going to do my PhD and become a PI myself. So I took that opportunity to kind of look for a job, get back into the healthcare field itself. And that's where I had found this job here at UHN, where I could be back in the hospital and kind of applying some of my learnings through engineering, and working right, not necessarily as frontline as Adil and the technologist team, but right in the heart of it, for sure.
Indeed. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And Ian, what about yourself? Tell us about your journey.
Sure. So I'm also a bit of a circuitous route to where I am today, but I did do undergrad in engineering. I did engineering physics, which is a great degree if you want to do grad school, because there's no natural endpoint unless you want to be Homer Simpson at a nuclear power plant. So I decided quickly I didn't want to do that. I had no machinations ever of being a physician, but I did like the idea of working in healthcare. I just thought that endpoint for your work seemed virtuous, for lack of a better word. And it just sort of seemed like a place I wanted to be. And so that took me to grad school, which is great. And then I worked in imaging. So I got my PhD, and then I was one of the very lucky graduate students. I got a job actually before I had defended. So they had offered me, so I had to beg, borrow, steal with my supervisor to let me go early, which he did. with a little bit of kicking and screaming. And I worked on this MRI project that sort of you mentioned at the start, which was also just right place at the right time. I didn't really realize how lucky I was while I was working on the project and how unique it was and sort of the learning, but I just went with it, right? I just, every new opportunity that came, I said yes. And then when that project had sort of come to an end, I decided I wasn't quite done. So I took another role, and that was my first sort of leadership role in industry. So I'd been in industry at that point for about 5 or 6 years. I was hired as a director of engineering for another company building complementary technology. And I had sort of realized I actually quite enjoyed being a manager, even more so than being a scientist. And so I stayed with that for a few more years. And then the funny story about coming to UHN was I then soured on that. It was another startup, and been about 9 years in different startups at this point. I just thought I'm done with startups, right? And I'm done with the culture. I'm done with the sort of the vibe, I think is the right word to use, to be apropos. Um, and I had been sort of working with recruiters and looking around, doing the LinkedIn thing. And I think my wife was at her wit's end with me because she's like, you keep, taking these interviews and you're non-committal. Like, what are you doing? And I got very far in another one. And then I finally just sort of shut it down because it didn't feel right. And I made a promise to my wife that I'm out of the job hunt. I'm happy. Life's good. And then this job popped up at UHN a day later. And I said, "You're going to hate me, but I think they wrote the job description for me. And it's my way back into academia, and it's my way back into sort of healthcare and being on the inside and not on the outside." And sort of quickly realized it's a very different beast, right? Like when you're on the outside, you're trying to sell into healthcare. When you're on the inside, you're trying to work with patients, right? And bring things in to help patients. And I just sort of liked that role. And then once I got into UHN, I was hired actually in a different part of biomedical engineering, sort of more of a research role. So doing research administration for some other people's research portfolios as a director. And I was also PI myself. And then when the medical engineering vacancy came up, which is in the broader biomed portfolio, our boss, who's the executive director of biomed at UHN, saw my background and thought, "Hey, would you like to, sort of split your time? I don't know how you will, but the offer's there." And
You're an
so
engineer, figure it out.
yeah. And then so similar to like splitting time with PhD and a job simultaneously, and sort of moving around and following jobs and not feeling like I was ever satisfied, I just sort of said, "Yeah, let's take it on. Let's go." And that's sort of where I am today. So I'm split between these operations roles and also being a PI UHN, and I love it, quite frankly.
Nice, nice. And Adele, bring us back 17 years, good sir.
Okay. Um, so actually, originally I applied to RMC and also to the Canadian Forces. My initial plan was to join the military and uh, just to appease my mother. I also applied to. I was looking at a lot of programs, and this one, biomedical engineering technology, was one that seemed to be interesting to me. So while I was waiting for the military applications to come in, the biomedical engineering technology application came in, or the acceptance. So uh, I decided to pursue it, fully thinking that the military is gonna contact me, and in a few months I don't know, end up in Afghanistan or something. But um, so as I started getting into the program, I began to really enjoy well the uh, the course with the combination of technology and medicine, and uh, we uh, we went on a lot of um, locations, certain hospitals during the program, just to get firsthand experience from clinicians and actual biomedical engineer technologists. And yeah, and slowly I kind of really fell in love with the career. And yeah, and all of a sudden it's 17 years into the future, and here I am. However, I found out um, maybe like 3 years ago that the application from the military and RMC actually did come in, but my mother got her hands on it first, and she opened the letter, read it, and just
Oh
tossed
no.
it. So had I gotten the letter, I probably wouldn't be here doing this panel. So there's
We're, we're grateful to your mom for tearing the letter up. And
yeah.
he's like, okay.
So yeah,
Thank you so much
that's
for
my journey.
sharing. Yeah. Okay. So in similar light, what can I ask Leanne? Maybe I'll start with you again, Leanne. What in your current role, what skills or other lessons did you pick up that have helped you on your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the really interesting things about working in medical engineering, I don't think it's unique to just the clinical engineer role. I think that all of us kind of have this. I think Ian calls it that we're the mushy middle. But it means that we kind of have to coordinate between a lot of different teams across UHN, right? So some days we are very corporate and we're presenting a plan for what kind of equipment we're going to be working on. So we're looking to senior leadership to make these presentations and hopefully secure that funding. Whereas other days we're working very closely with the clinical teams, either troubleshooting what's going wrong with the equipment, or looking at what needs to be brought in next to feedback into those plans. But then also all of the teams in between, right? So I'm working with procurement, I'm working with finance, working with the facilities teams sometimes because their components feed into our components. We need the electricity, we need some of the gas systems for our equipment to work. So truly is just that integration. And as I'm sure you can imagine, there's so many different communication styles, so many different people that really exist here at UHN. So that need to be able to communicate with everyone. I think that's such an interesting skill, and I think it's something maybe I started to develop when I was in academia, but it's definitely been really grown since coming to UHN.
Agreed. Thanks, Leanne.
Yeah.
And in that vein, Ian, let's talk a little bit more about collaboration. Talk to us about the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration in advancing healthcare technologies. I know last year, I believe you received like 1.9 million via the Ontario Research Fund to work with Dr. Valiente on developing advanced MRI technologies. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. I think you don't get anywhere without friends. And that's this, and you don't get anywhere without good colleagues, and you don't get anywhere without relationships and trust, and like a two-way trust, trust in you and you trusting others. And that's especially true at really huge organizations like UHN. Like I think it's easy, because we're healthcare, we tend to be very lean in each individual portfolio or each individual department, for instance. So if we're looking across nursing or we're looking across even managers and clinical directors, it seems really big, but these small individuals have a lot of power and they have a lot of knowledge, and you all have diffuse responsibilities. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you want to move things forward in MRI, let's just say MRI. So that's my research field, and you're thinking, well, I'm at UHN, we're the number one hospital, I'm academic affiliated. Certainly, this can't be that hard. Well, try and bring an MRI into a hospital, and then you're going to find out how hard that is. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have some perspective on everyone else's demands on their time. If you meet them where they are and you're able to work with them and build those relationships so that they understand that you're coming from the perspective of patient care and maybe not from a personal incentive or something from that perspective. And also understand the landscape and who to reach out to when you do reach roadblocks. I think, especially at a place like UHN, because it's so big and we have diffuse responsibilities, it's not always very clear who's responsible for what. And sometimes those who are responsible for it don't even know that they're responsible for it until you tell them. And they might
Preach.
see that well, or they might not. So I'm always of the perspective of make friends first, and only, and it's very easy to to get frustrated with folks. It's very easy to wonder why your initiative isn't moving forward. But just like spend a minute in their shoes, right? You're a clinical director and you're balancing all these demands. You have lots of financial pressures, you have HR pressures, right? We have a hard time hiring nurses right now and other allied health staff. And so your new initiative in MRI might not be at the top of their priorities, right? So how do you then, but we still have a mandate to do sort of innovation. So how do you do that? Well, you have to come to them when it's appropriate, and you also have to be able to present and craft sort of some sort of innovation as a way to sort of serve the patient and not necessarily some other demand. And so I found that incredibly powerful. Try and make as many friends as you can. And you never know when you need to just text someone to move something forward or pick up the phone call and give them a phone call and get very comfortable with that because that's fundamentally what makes UHN work are those phone calls, right? Those quick Zoom chats are like, hey, I'm having a really tough time with this particular issue. Can you help? And I find that's sort of number one. And then number two is the research, which is very unfortunate. But it's really, as a PI in operations now, I find my way is to like build those relationships so that when a good idea comes, they trust you and you're going to be able to push it forward and you're going to find the resources and supports.
Agreed. Emotional intelligence is paramount in working in organizations like this, indeed. Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Ian. So, Adil, I wanted to ask you, for your perspective over these 17 years, what with the innovations in technology, in the solutions and the evolution in technology, has it made your job easier or harder?
Well, it has complicated my job at times, but I wouldn't say harder because I also do find it very interesting. So it actually helps me dive deeper into that rabbit hole. So for example, so one of the shortcomings that I find with the technologists that not just our technologists, but in any hospital, is that the there's sort of a disconnect between the actual like technology that we help maintain or install and how it's actually used in the clinical application. So uh, there, some of us here could um, you know take apart a machine blindfolded and tell you exactly what each individual component uh, operates as a function of the machine. But on the clinical side, they have no idea how it goes or how it's used on the patient. So uh, we're starting to encourage more, uh, I guess, conversations with the clinicians and especially which helps with the RFP process. So when clinicians have some sort of issue with the current technology, and they'll explain, oh yeah, we inserted it into the patient, and it's we're getting noise from one of the leads, or a lot of us are just sitting there like, "Oh, okay, we have no idea what that means, but so um, a lot of us are um, sometimes we work at the or closer to the table side during procedures, learning from the physicians and from the nurses uh, of the actual clinical application portion, and we we help use those skills during something like RFP uh, to improve overall healthcare. Yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, so before we get into the audience questions, I wanted to discuss one last thing, which was barriers and difficulties and challenges that you guys have faced. So I'll start with you, Ian, on this one. So what career challenges have you faced, and can you provide any guidance on how you overcame these barriers?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think feeling generally just sort of disquieted in sort of my career and not being able to put my finger on it. I think that was probably the biggest barrier for me to like spend some time, do some introspection, and understand like what did I really want? Like what do I really want to do? Is it, do I enjoy being director because of the title or some of the responsibilities, or do I enjoy it because there's a broader systems approach that I really enjoy? And I think that was really, really useful. You sort of mentioned that, sort of my intro, my wife, I think, was going to divorce me because I was really going through that third life. I'd like to say quarter life, but let's be realistic. My third life crisis of, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? And I think I was sort of getting my own way. I needed to just sort of like slow down, relax, realize Rome wasn't built in a day kind of perspective. And the opportunities are there. So always be looking and ready and be resilient because you're going to get knocked down a lot more than you're going to get move forward into what you want. Um, but it's kind of like be patient and slow, but then act quickly, I think would probably be the best advice I can give. So if you see an opportunity or, whether it's career or, a project or, work with someone, um, be patient for it. But then if you do see an opportunity, go, immediately go. Like the best advice I ever got from a former colleague, actually when he was quitting and taking a new job was if a better offer comes on the table, take it and never look back. Um, just don't do that because it's going to be a really strong impediment to you sort of moving forward. And I thought that was probably the best advice I ever got because as some of the young folks on this panel, you might really fall in love with what you're doing, and more importantly, you might really fall in love with your colleagues, and you might not want to change that dynamic. But then an opportunity might come, and my suggestion would always be like, if it gives you the vibe, to use vibe again, that you think you really want this, it's kind of just like dating. Just go for it, right? Like you kind of already have made the decision if it feels good.
Thanks, Ian. And Leanne, perhaps I'll ask you to share, and especially I want your purview as a female engineer. I know this is a male-dominated field, so
Yeah.
can you give us that perspective, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy that you brought up the women in engineering thing because it's something that's near and dear to my heart from the time that I was a student as well. I was part of some of our student societies. Um, but I would say I'd like to start by saying that at UHN, our clinical engineers actually have a very strong representation of females. We have a lot of females on our clinical engineer team. Our technologists, not so much. I would say we have mostly male technologists, but that is actually something that we're working to, make sure that it's a more even balance and an appropriate balance. And that's something that I would say I don't actually find here at UHN that it's as much of a barrier as maybe I've experienced in the past. But it's certainly something that I've experienced that like if you're sitting at a table, sometimes you can say the exact same idea as your male colleague who's sitting right next to you, and when you say it, it's maybe brushed off, and then the person next to you says the same thing, and it seems like it's a great idea, and it's everyone's favorite thing. Yeah. Um, so it's still something that is quite pervasive, I would say. And I know that there's a lot of work being done in universities and across, especially healthcare organizations, to kind of do that balance a little bit better. But my suggestion would be to kind of find your allies. There are a lot of great people working in the engineering space and who are ready to boost your voice. So if you can find those allies and make sure that they, when they're at the table, they amplify your voice to say and really bolster what you're saying and make sure it is known that it is your idea. And then when it does happen, because it will inevitably happen, that maybe your voice isn't heard or something inappropriate is said, because unfortunately that's still something that happens. Have your support system because those are the people who can kind of boost you back up and remind you that your voice is an important one and you bring a diversity to the team that is quite important in every field, not just in clinical or healthcare spaces.
True. Thank you so much, and
Yeah,
thank you for demonstrating the vulnerability there.
yeah.
Appreciate it. So, Adil, apart from the maternal impediments, good sir, what challenges have you faced, and how did you
Uh,
overcome?
so back in the Stone Age of 2008, 2009, when I think Leanne was in elementary school or something. Um, So the first 2 years of the department, it was a totally different department. It was very, very small, low profile. We didn't have any clinical engineers. Uh, we had our director was up in a different department, so it's very, very disconnected from the operations side of medical engineering. And we had quite the skeleton crew. So on on my side, it was just myself and my team leader who had his own challenges, and we were taking care of uh, roughly like 70% of the hospital's equipment, just the two of us. And so oftentimes there were uh, the, something like the preventative maintenance. There's no way we could keep up with it with just the two of us. Um, and so and vacations were just like a concept, really. You know, we
For
couldn't
sure.
we couldn't leave each other, right? So I was married to the guy essentially. Um, so it so the first 2 years were very, very rough, and then we did get a new director. Well, he's uh, I guess the junior director who was more on the operation side, and he led an expansion uh, uh, project, I guess, for several years. So uh, we added clinical engineers to help us with project management because at the time it was the senior technologist, so someone like my team leader who was sort of like a de facto project lead. And so clinical engineers came. They took a lot of that responsibility. Um, and then we added more technologists and more clinical engineers. And now we have a, a pretty sizable, respectable department, although we have taken on more responsibilities. So we've taken on new whole departments as part of our portfolio. And but yeah, and now we have so many different staff members we can rely upon. So there's a lot of uh, yeah, just a lot of help for us to do our job here. And yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge. Once after about like 5 years, everything just went smooth sailing until the pandemic hit. Then there was like a whole new low for a lot of us, but it was more of like a uh, in the individual level because there's just a lot more uh, issues that came with the pandemic. So those were probably the two biggest, but we made it through, and now we're an amazing partner.
Cheers to grit and resilience indeed. Thank you so much. So, Jordan, before we move to the Q&A, I believe there was a temperature check that you wanted to do.
Yes, I will pop that up now. Um, so if you could kindly just fill out this poll, we just want to gauge how you're feeling about the workshop or this panel. So I'll leave this up just for a few seconds. While you're doing that, I just wanted to make one little note. I'm just currently looking at the back end of Slido, and I'm seeing a big scary red bar at the top that's just saying that there's some unexpected downtime or issues with Slido. So if you're having any problems with that, just I've opened up the chat and you can post those in the chat, but I'm seeing people submitting questions, so I'm thinking it's okay. But just in case, please put them in the chat. Okay, I'll leave a couple more seconds, and then I will end the poll, and then I will share my screen to show the questions that are being asked.
Perfect.
I'll do 5 more seconds. Great. Now we'll do a second temperature check right before we end the Zoom. So if you can stick around and fill that out at the end, that would be super appreciated. And that, close this. Share my screen. There we go. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Okay. So what's the first question? What is the favorite part of each one of your jobs? Wow, okay. All right, let's start with Leanne on that one.
Yeah, I think it's probably the level of interactions that I actually get to have with the clinicians, especially being in the OR. Like just I would say 2 weeks ago, there was an issue that came up with some of our devices, and I was actually able to join because it was a safety concern. Often, when there's a safety concern, the clinical engineers get more involved in the investigation. I was down in the OR while there was an active case running and helping one of our technologists to troubleshoot and make sure it was a safe environment. It was, thankfully. But that kind of thing is definitely one of my favorites when it's actually, you can really see the tangible outcome of what your work is immediately. That's really fun for me.
Thanks, Leanne. And Adil, what about you?
Uh, being on the front end of the medical technology. So whenever we receive something new, usually we get our hands on it first, so we get to play around with it, and also talk to the clinicians on how it's used on the patient. So it's yeah, it's the experience of using
Okay,
this of the
that you
equipment.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Nice. And Ian, what about yourself?
I'll echo a bit of what Leanne said, obviously not in the same acute detail, but the clinical access. I think that is very unique to obviously being in hospital, but also to our particular role. And that's particularly rewarding in research because we can go between the two. A lot of people say they do sort of translatable research. But in my experience, the only people that really can are either if you're a clinician PI or if you're sort of lucky to be sort of working with us because we actually do work at the bedside. So if you do have new innovations, seeing those being rolled out and also driving them from the patient perspective. So not coming out with research questions. For instance, good to go back to that grant I had with Tofik. I didn't have to think about anything other than I just talked to Tofik and we thought, well, this is a really great idea because he has a clinical challenge. Let's solve it or try to solve it. And that is very unique and very rewarding because if it works, there are people that we will help tomorrow.
Fair enough. Thank you. Um, let's see. What transferable skills did you acquire over the course of your academic career and now your professional career? We touched on that a little bit, but let's go with Adil first on this one.
So one of the skills that the ingrained in us in the college was being able to be dynamic in your problem solving skills. So oftentimes the the evidence or the evidence for say like a problem, it's not apparent. So being able to go through a uh, sort of like a problem solving matrix to to uh, to solve those issues, uh, and it was heavily ingrained in us in our program, and that's definitely useful in the hospital as well. That's pretty much our bread and butter here. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Adil. And Leanne?
Yeah, one that kind of comes to mind is working as like a master's student and even in upper years of undergrad programs, you tend to get closer with the professors and the PIs. And I will say this with a grain of salt and say that not all PIs are this way, but some of them do have quite a complex to how important they feel they are. And that was definitely something that's very transferable to here in the hospital. I got pretty used to, a professor is just another person and you can interact with them the same way. And obviously here in the hospital, we have a lot of doctors and different professionals that are highly trained. that, sometimes give off that same air, but quite frequently, as long as you are talking to the right person, they're actually quite approachable, and you just treat them like another person. And often you need their support and their input. So using those same skills to kind of engage with them and get them on board for your projects is really important.
Thanks, Leanne. And Ian?
I think I'll go back to persistence and resiliency. I think any degree or diploma in the physical sciences and engineering is hard and trying, and learning to get through that, I think, is a very important skill because that doesn't go away, right? Like if you think your undergrad degree was hard to get through, start having two kids while balancing, a job and trying to perform. And I think it's really the people that can get through that fire that end up doing well. I think we overemphasize talent sometimes, and sometimes hard work actually does pay off. It takes longer, but those moments in the library where you're sort of having this existential dread about the pending exam season, getting through that, and then bringing that with you, I think is very important for your career moving forward. Career's a long time, right? 30, 40 years.
Agreed. And Leanne, this question is for you. So aside from a bachelor's in biomed engineering, are there any specific requirements for obtaining a clinical engineer job? And do you need any certifications or a master's degree?
Yeah, so for my role, it is required that you have a master's degree in engineering, I want to say. There are programs that did exist that was specific to clinical engineering. That was a program at U of T until I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago that ended. And actually, one of my colleagues here in the department was one of the last graduates from that program. There is a program that exists currently that's a combined program at University of Ottawa and Carleton. So there are programs that specifically take you into the clinical engineering world, but it's not mandatory. But a master's degree is mandatory as part of our requirements for the job.
Thanks, Leanne. Okay, so we have time for one more, and I will say this question about, do you have any suggestion for how nurses can get involved in biomedical research? Yes, that's an excellent one. I'll leave that open to the panel for who can take that one.
Maybe I will. Did I unmute?
Yeah.
I would say nurses bring clinical perspectives and experiences that are extremely valuable, that are often unique to what we have in the department. So from that perspective, I'd say what are the easy, so it's valued, right? So I think that's the first part. Value and respect. And the second part is, so then how do you engage with us? I think the easiest way is reaching out first, so we know who you are, doing an introduction, and I think we're always open to that. There's also sometimes job postings which you may not think directly speak to your background as a nurse. But what I can tell you, sort of in the back office when we're hiring, we're thinking, oh, it'd be really nice if someone with nursing experience applies, because we value it, and because we sort of require that perspective sometimes, because we don't understand patient flow, to the same degree, and have those relationships, or been in those situations. I mean, Adil is the closest to it, but it's still very distinct and different, the patient experience. So reach out. I think if you're passing around contact information, it could be myself, it could be Leanne, it could even be Adil. I think maybe I wouldn't say I can't say officially we're the friendliest department at UHN, but if they were taking bets, we're certainly up there. And you will get a response, and we are responsive, and we would like to work with people and get their perspectives.
Perfect. And on that note, looking towards collaboration. So thank you so much to our incredible panelists and to everyone who joined today's session. Jordan put up the second temperature check, and if you guys can fill out the survey as well once we end the panel. And I'll also provide a link to the medical engineering homepage if you want to learn more about MedEng's incredible work and discover the expertise that helps make world-class care possible. So on behalf of the ORT and RP at UHN, I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you soon as we continue to learn and grow together. as Team UHN. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.